So my name is Brad Craig. I'm a licensed social worker and a certified family life educator. I've been specializing in the field of helping families raise children between two homes since 1992. Started my career doing custody evaluations and then opened up my own practice where I help families work together to raise their children between two homes. I was asked today to speak on the topic of high conflict. That in itself is a good 3 to 4 hour presentation. But I'm going to quickly run through a lot of the topics that I think are important for you to know about high conflict families and wrap up with some things that you can do if your co-parent is a high conflict individual. I teach co-parenting classes. I do mediation for families that are raising children between two homes. I do parenting coordination services for really high conflict families, which is the vast majority of my direct services with clients. I also do collaborative law work and conduct professional seminars for other mental health professionals that are working with families raising children between two homes. I'm the author of Between Two Homes, Co-Parenting Handbook, and the workbook that goes along with it, which is basically a portable co-parenting education class. I also have a website, childreninthemiddle.com, that's really designed to help families work together to raise their children between two homes, and there's some free handouts under childreninthemiddle.com/forms.htm, and I'll be referring to some of those documents through the presentation. So let's move on to what is a high conflict family. I want to start by just addressing co-parenting in general because that term has come up several times. And co-parenting is not limited to divorce. In fact, I think the term children of divorce is negative and stereotyping. I'm a child who grew up between two homes. I'm also a co-parent like some of our previous speakers. That term of divorce is very limiting as opposed to the experience of the child, which is a child growing up between two homes. Sometimes parents were never married. Maybe it was a one-night intimate encounter, or maybe they lived together for a while. Sometimes it may be a same-sex couple that's raising a child between two homes. Maybe they weren't allowed to get married in the past. They are now. And maybe grandparents and other people involved. So co-parenting is really the process of working together to raise children between two homes. Professionally, we've broken down these categories into three different categories. There's cooperative co-parenting, and I think a lot of the comments this morning have been talking about cooperative parenting, and I've been seeing some of the questions in the chat section. I, by the way, am not going to be doing the chat or the Q&A. I'll just be presenting. But a lot of the topics are, what do I do with my co-parent? So let's start by, this morning has mostly been about cooperative co-parenting. Cooperative co-parenting is parents working together in the best interest of their child. So if I could give you an example of that would be, the child comes in the door, I'm your co-parent, our child comes in their door at my household, they're home with me, and says, I'm really mad at my mom. If we have a cooperative co-parenting relationship, then I'm probably going to respond, you look like you're mad. I'm going to focus on helping our child reduce being angry, give them some skills to deal with their anger, maybe get some basic information. Then I'm going to call you and I'm going to say, or I'm going to send you a message. Hey, by the way, when Billy came home today, he said that he was really angry with you. I didn't get into all the facts or anything, just wanted to let you know. And then we're going to have a discussion. And that discussion may be how we can be on the same page, talking about feelings and thoughts, creating continuity and consistency between the homes. It might even be a meeting at one or the other home or at a local restaurant when we're not going through COVID, and having a conversation with your child about how do we create that continuity and consistency. So cooperative co-parenting is very much about this, working together in the best interest of your child. Parallel co-parenting is about both households working separately in the best interest of the child. It's very much about disengaging, where cooperative co-parenting is very much about working together in the best interest of our child. Parallel co-parenting is working our best separately. So if our child comes in the house and says, I'm really mad at my mom, what I'm going to do is focus on that feeling and basically tell the child, now that sounds like something you need to talk to your mom about and defer over. I may send you a message that said he was angry, but we're not engaged in working together for continuity and consistency in all areas. It's more about reducing the conflict. Conflicted co-parenting is where it's damaging to children. Conflicted co-parenting, a child comes in the door and says, I'm mad at my mom. I'm going to respond, I bet you are mad at your mom. That's why I divorced her. She's a jerk. You know, you need to tell her this. You need to tell her that. That would be conflicted co-parenting. So I just wanted to clearly define the difference between cooperative co-parenting, parallel co-parenting, and conflicted co-parenting. It is a spectrum, though, and I think that's important to understand. We want to protect children from conflicted co-parenting, but when it comes to parallel and cooperative, There are many families who use a little bit of both, raising their child between two homes. Like they might have continuity and consistency in a lot of rules. That's where it'd be cooperative co-parenting. But they may have a few things that are different between those two households, like chores, or a good example of that may be religion. You know, that the child on first, third, and fifth weekends goes to a Baptist church, second and fourth weekends to a Catholic church. But both parents agree that the religious decisions they make are not going to discredit the other parent's belief. So that's parallel. The child's going to two separate churches, but it's cooperative in the sense of the united message that they're sending to their child. So what does the research show when children are exposed to high conflict? It's important to understand that so many of the families that I work with, especially my high conflict families, will say, well, I'm just doing this for my child, or I'm just fighting for my child. Fighting in itself is often what's destructive to the kiddo. So what we see with these kiddos that are growing up between two homes where there's a lot of conflict is we see reoccurring and chronic stress in the children. We see continued insecurity, shows up a lot of times in counseling and in school. They end up self-blaming or experiencing guilt. There's a chronic sense of helplessness for some of these kiddos, especially in their teen years. There may be fears for their own physical safety. And they may experience a sense of rejection and neglect. Now, again, there's a lot more to that, but those are some of the highlights of children exposed to this conflict. What we see with adults who were children who grew up between two homes is they have lower levels of reported happiness than children who grew up between two homes with minimal conflict. There's higher levels of psychological problems with these adults. They tend to have difficulty in relationships, which makes sense. If you're not trusting your two parents, the stability of your family life growing up, if they're in conflict with each other, then it's hard to trust relationships and trustworthy. And so obviously they have those higher rates of divorce. So what is a high conflict family? What's a pattern? One is they frequently litigate co-parenting matters. Instead of trying to resolve them themselves, if the judge knows the family on a first name basis, that's probably a sign of a high conflict family. They have difficulty maintaining healthy boundaries. They may not understand what a boundary is. If they do understand a boundary, it's a rigid boundary as opposed to a flexible boundary. They tend to be more adult focused than child focused. And what I mean by that is they make decisions first, what's best for me? Then I'll make a decision what's best for the child, as opposed to starting off with, let's make a decision in the best interest of the child, which may be a good description between the difference between cooperative and parallel. In cooperative co-parenting, if I'm your cooperative co-parenting, I make decisions what's in our child's best interest. If we have a parallel co-parenting relationship, I may be focused on me. I don't want you in my, so if we have a cooperative co-parenting relationship, I might invite you in during the exchange. If we have a parallel co-parenting relationship, I may ask you to stay outside, or maybe we even do the curbside exchange so that we're not engaging in conflict with each other. They tend to be more adult focused than child focused, as I've already said. They're more likely to have mental health concerns. I think that speaks for itself. They maintain high degrees of anger and distrust with each other. So they like opportunities to bash their co-parent on Facebook to the public, wherever they can. And obviously they experience a lot more difficulty in communication than cooperative co-parents who've learned the tools to reduce conflict and change their vocabulary to be more supportive. So an overall description of this, high conflict families, the adults tend to be emotionally hooked on each other. Their degree of connectedness actually tells you how close. There's, when folks first start dating, it's typically what we call positive intimacy. Oh, I can't wait to hear from them. And then you get married and, you're not talking maybe every single second, but you still love to hear from each other. It's a nice place to be in the relationship. Healthy cooperative co-parents, when the intimate relationship falls apart, then they typically move to neutrality. They understand that the difference of love is not hate, it's really neutrality. And so they wish well for their co-parent and they maintain a business relationship. High conflict parents unfortunately move to negative intimacy, where they get a thrill out of disparaging their co-parent, saying bad things about them, painting them in a negative light. They have extreme difficulty separating their previous intimate relationship from their current business relationship of working together to raise their child between two homes. One of the words that I really dislike is the word my ex, because my ex focuses solely on the intimate relationship. That's my previous intimate relationship. I always encourage parents I work with, don't refer to your co-parent as your ex. Refer to them by their first name, or you can say my child's mom or my child's dad. These high conflict families tend to stay focused on, because you did this when we were married, and it negatively impacted me, as opposed to how are we going to work together independent of that past? How are we going to work together to raise our child? Anger and conflict tend to keep them connected, even when they're remarried. Some of my high conflict families, mom and dad are both remarried, but you would think they were still married. They're engaged in so much conflict. In fact, mom is basically married knight in shining armor to continue her warfare against dad. Dad's married Xena the warrior princess to continue his warfare against mom. Sometimes they have others take on their responsibilities, like the step parent, the grandparent, or even employees, so that they're not directly involved with taking care of their child. And often with high conflict families, you see extended family members, attorneys, sometimes mental health professionals, or others that are immersed in the conflict, really adding fuel to the fire. The way they stay engaged is they often put their children in some difficult roles for the child. For example, the messenger child, tell your mother this, tell your father that, as opposed to the parents communicating directly. Or the secret agent child, what'd you do with your mom? Where'd you go? What'd you do? What was it rated? Who did you see it with? They probe their child and gather information about the other household from their child. Or they put the child in the role of decision maker. Do you want to see your mom? Do you want to see your dad? Would you rather live here? Would you rather live there? Or they may put their child in the role of the exchange facilitator. Like Kristen mentioned, there are some folks that do the curbside exchanges where one parent stays inside the house, the other parent pulls up curbside and drops off the child. We call that situation the exchange facilitator. The parents can't hand the child off directly to each other without negatively impacting the child. So we put the child in the role of that exchange facilitator, which might be safer than having parents directly exchange. They enroll children in activities, but don't bother to get the consent from the other parent. Or if the child does enroll, just out of aggressive or passive aggressive behaviors, they won't take the child during their parenting time. Again, they involve other people in the dispute, the coaches, teachers. There's the separate parent-teacher conferences. We can't sit in the same room together. And often these families stonewall information from the other parent that's needed information to take care of the child. So what the conflict does to the child is it diminishes the parent's role as a protector. You'd like to think, gee, just because my two parents don't live in the same household together, if somebody were to harm me, I would see my two parents, my mom and dad, or my two moms or my two dads, that united front to confront the world that's against me. But often children growing up between two homes with high conflict parents don't even have that resource. My parents aren't even united when I am abused. It complicates the child's role identity, because often the child tells these parents, basically tells mom what she wants to hear, dad what he wants to hear. And it fails to model conflict resolution for children. Conflict isn't bad. You know, if mom comes in and says, I want hamburgers tonight, and dad says, I really want Chinese food, and then they go out for Italian food, that's a negotiation. That's conflict, and it's a healthy resolution to that conflict. Children living in one home, when we go to the Italian restaurant, that's where we've learned, look, my parents negotiated. Children growing up between two homes in a successful cooperative co-parenting relationship, or even a safe parallel co-parenting relationship, can still learn these tools by watching their parents negotiate. But often these parents don't. They take an approach of, I'm going to fight for my position. The other parent says, I'm going to fight for my position. And ultimately the child's caught in the middle. How do you deal with high conflict? So as Kristen mentioned earlier, the only person you can really change is yourself. You have no power over changing your co-parent. But ultimately, what I have seen with a lot of the families that I work with is once I've taught one parent how to disengage and maintain a business-like relationship, what I often find is the other parent then trickles into those changes. So what can you do? These are 15-minute topics easily within themselves, but I'm just going to hit some of the highlights. You can start with just taking a deep breath. Take the time to respond. Think about before you respond, especially if you're sending a message in writing, put it in draft. Think about it before you hit send. Learn to disengage. Don't get on the dance floor with them anymore. Learn that you're bigger, you're better, you're stronger than that. There's no reason for you to get out there. If you're disengaging, it gives you a lot of power, because you can say, look, they're throwing their tantrum. I'm not that type person anymore. I'm not going to fall into that game. I'm just going to respond to the specifics. Use those I feel statements. You know, I feel concerned when Billy was waiting for you because you're running late, and I suggest that maybe we let each other know in advance. Using an I feel statement, rather than you need to be here on time, I feel it's important that we agree to notice each other if we're running late. What do you think? Learn the tool of rephrasing. Instead of saying, you're a sorry son of a gun, you were late last week too, don't yell at me, you can just rephrase. They yell at you, you sorry, no good, you weren't here on time. You respond, so I hear you'd like for me to be to notice you in advance if I'm running late. Will that work for you? So you're taking their long dissertation attack at you and rephrasing it into a productive phrase. Utilize reflective listening. You can say things like, sounds like you're really angry. Sorry about that. Can we move on to challenge your own cognitions? What I mean by that is use something, do a search for Socratic questioning. Challenge your own assumptions. How do I know that to be true? Even if it is true, why should that affect me? Whether he likes me or not is independent. I have a job to do. I have a job to co-parent with him. Follow some of the tools that you can utilize from mental health professionals. On my website, I have written communication guidelines and a handout called Rules for Co-Parenting. Use those. Before you respond to your co-parent, pull out those documents, read over and go, okay, is it meeting this criteria? One of the things I strongly want to encourage you to do is become as educated as you possibly can. If you go to the Talking Parents website, go to talkingparents.com/blog/ultimate list of resources for co-parents. All those words have hyphens between them, by the way, in the ultimate list of resources for co-parents. There are resources available for you. Read my co-parenting handbook. It's a brief solution-focused book providing you tools that we've talked about today. Take online educational courses or live classes if they're available in your community. These are all options that give you power in advance by being educated. Another tool that's available for you is folks who specialize in working with high conflict. In most states, there's individuals called parenting coordinators. They're called different things in different states. For example, here in Texas, we're called parenting facilitators, but these are professionals, mental health professionals, or sometimes attorneys who help families reduce conflict. And it's different than counseling or therapy. It's basically a case management mediation type of role. And you can find parenting coordinators in your neck of the woods by going to parentingcoordinationcentral.com. Suggestions that I want to give you on parallel co-parenting: love your child more than you hate your co-parent. Make sure and say positive things about your co-parent around your child on a regular basis. Maintain an attitude of non-interference and disengagement with the other household. It's trying to maintain a business relationship and communicating about the things we need to. Stay oriented on the task at hand. So when they call you with 8 different topics, just focus on that one that's really significant to the conversation. Remember, the goal is keeping conflict to a minimum. So again, learn the tools to disengage. Stay focused on the present and remain solution focused. Can we agree moving forward? Whether it's ever happened in the past, can we agree moving forward? Maintain business-like communication using please, thank you, some of the guidelines that I've talked about before. If you do communicate verbally, as I think Kristen mentioned earlier, put things in black and white. One of the things I find is parents sometimes think they've agreed on something and they haven't because it's not in black and white. The difference between cooperative and parallel is not rigid, it's a spectrum. So remember, do your best, and your child is worth it if you will utilize some tools to maybe disengage from your co-parent. It's been great talking to you today. Thank you very much.